23, Penelope, and they finally get together. Neither one of them, again, running headlong into one another's arms, and the music swells, and oh, honey. There's some, you know. She doesn't trust him. Well, realistically, he's been gone for 20 years, and we know what he's been doing. You know, what reason does she have to trust him?
At the beginning, she didn't even believe it that he's at home.
Yeah. And quite frankly, you know, just on a recognizable human level, when you spend that long waiting for something and it's suddenly there, I mean, she spent 20 years being the wife of the absent Odysseus. So suddenly to have that identity, and this whole poem is about identity, to have that identity shifted away from her, it's like, well, you know, how do I become the wife of somebody who's actually here? That's a radical shift. She is very skeptical that, you know, that this is true. She doesn't really believe Eurycleia when she comes in. Honey, you know, the master's home. Like, yeah, okay, fine. Penelope is Odysseus's equal in every single way. And she will not go for the easy answer. She will not just buy into, say, oh, okay, great, he's here. She is skeptical. Penelope confronts him very directly. She crossed the threshold, which, again, poetically, symbolically, seems quite, you know, symbolic of something. This is like line 88 or something. And sat across from him beside the wall in firelight. Again, just more details. She's sitting beside the wall. She's always associated with a pillar or a wall, sturdy part of the household, the oikos. And she is the final representation of that household that is standing in opposition to him. Yeah.
Didn't they use him as like the fire beforehand, and now like the fire is like on, like gleaming on her? It's like she sees that it's him now. It's like about to happen.
Yeah. Well, the fire can mean a lot of things right there. It's very obviously a passion. He was stoking fire of his own vengeance before, but the passion to be home and with his wife is there as well. But fire is also light. It is casting this new light where they can see one another perhaps clearly for the first time. You can go crazy on the symbolism there. What's that? They're meeting on somewhat equal terms. This is a face-off, and they're there to recognize one another. Now, presumably, Odysseus looks a little different than when he left. Athena has done her little magic makeover thing again, and, you know, prettied him up a little. But still, he's 20 years older. That's going to show. So she is sitting there and trying to recognize beyond the appearances what it could mean if it's the same in the back. Michelle?
Was Odysseus' appearance like shown during the fight, or when he saw Penelope? Like, what was is it the same? Because I feel like that would change my perception of the fight.
Most of the fight, he was Athena pretty much took the whammy off of him and, you know, buffed him out again. So everybody there would recognize, not just from the act of the bow, but just, you know, hey, wow, he looks familiar. But they're now facing off, and they have to come to some sort of a recognition of one another. And there's this great line, like line 105. She sat in silence, stunned. Sometimes when she was glancing at his face, it seemed like him, But then his dirty clothes were unfamiliar. Telemachus scolded her, "Mother, cruel, heartless mother." He's so quick to blame the women. "Cruel, heartless mother, why are you doing this, rejecting father?" Well, he has been gone for 20 years. "Why do you not go over, sit beside him, and talk to him? No woman in the world would be so obstinate." Well, she's not no woman in the world. She's Penelope. She's an iconic woman, image of, I don't know, independence, but certainly strength. So, that just shines well on her. But thoughtfully she answered, "My child, I am confused. I cannot speak or meet his eyes. If this is really him, if my Odysseus has come back home, we have our ways to recognize each other." It's testing, but it's also about looking beneath the surface. Because appearance is such a thing throughout this, Odysseus has been disguised for most of this time. He's still, he is still dressed in his rags. His face is prettied up a little bit, but we have our ways. And if you're in a long-term relationship with somebody, you get to know them very intimately. And, okay, it doesn't matter what you look like after a while. I can recognize you. I can see you. We have through secret signs. I love that also, secret signs, because so much of this poem is conveyed through imagery, through signs and symbols and things that we don't quite understand perhaps at first until we think about them, through secret signs. So they are in effect at this point reading one another, just like we are reading the poem, and we are all at one point or another trying to read reality around us and figuring out what the hell does it all mean. So Odysseus gets rid of Telemachus. "Go away, boy. Your mom and I have stuff to do." But he comes up with this ruse for Telemachus to go down. Again, appearances. He knows, always thinking ahead, he knows that, well, gee, I just slaughtered 108 of the princes of the best families of Ithaca and nearby kingdoms. Somebody's going to ask some questions about that. So, Telemachus, go downstairs, everything's all cleaned up. Tell the poet, whom we just pardoned, to start singing and playing some music. Tell everybody to make lots of noise and make it seem like a party, so that everybody else will think that, well, all right, maybe Penelope finally got off her butt, chose somebody, and they're having a wedding. Isn't that nice? It has nothing to do with whatever, with the stench of death and river of blood flowing down from the palace right now. Appearances. So Telemachus runs off to go do that. And Odysseus and Penelope face one another. And I love how this builds. It's so chess-like in the way they're just doing one move and watching the reaction of the other, and then another and watching the reaction. And Penelope is on top of it all the time. On line 170, where'd he go? "Well, Nanny, make a bed for me so I can rest." And he drops the word bed. It's almost as if it's a leading question, because he's planting an idea, a sign, a symbol into the conversation to see if it will spark a consequence, a reaction. Penelope said shrewdly, "You extraordinary man, I am not acting proudly or underplaying this big event, yet I am not surprised how you look. Now, Eurycleia, make the bed for him outside the room he built himself. Pull out the bedstead and spread the quilts and blankets on it." She spoke to test him, and Odysseus was furious and told his loyal wife. "What's the problem with the bed?"
It's very heavy.
very heavy. Why?
Because he made it himself.
He made it himself, but it's more than that.
It's a tree.
It's a tree. What does that mean?
It can't be moved.
It can't be moved. The bed is carved from a giant tree around which he built the house. The bed is at the center and it is unmovable. It is rooted into the ground. The symbolism is not hard to see. The bed is the center of the marriage. The marriage is the center of the home. The home is what cannot be moved. Penelope has stayed loyal, we are reminded right in that line, for 20 years. She has not moved. Maybe he has. But he is outraged at the question that it might be moved. That's what prompts him. He thought that he would be a little too clever, wait for her to say something, oh, well, no. Bed, you mentioned bed. But she keeps her cool. She says, no, I see that move, and, well, I'm going to raise you, and I'm just going to toss this out there. And I'm going to suggest, yeah, we can move the bed. It's been moved, because if you can move the bed, what does that mean? What? It was moved before? Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, that's how it gets to move. That's how beds move. It means she has been disloyal. She has moved or dislodged the bed from its foundation.
Another thing that's interesting is that it's made out of an olive tree, and olive is supposed to like the olive tree, and Greek is supposed to be like friendship and peace. So.
Yes, very good. There's so much bound up in that. But it's Odysseus who flies off the handle. What? Again, he feels his manhood questioned. He feels his ego bruised. You slut! Who moved that bed with you? Rocking the headboard. He gets emotional. He gets irrational. He flies off the handle. She stays perfectly cool. She wins. She outmaneuvers him. She gets him to lay down all of his cards first, to really brutalize that metaphor. But they're sitting there just, trying to see which one of them is going to blink first. I think they know. I think she knows very well at this point. But she's testing him to see how much he has changed, how much he may still care. If she had cheated, well, maybe he doesn't care that much because, he doesn't really have that much invested in it. Yeah, you did? All right, great. Well, I've been sleeping with everything. Gods, goddesses, animals, you name it. I don't care. But by declaring that he cares, by having that rash emotional reaction, he is demonstrating that he still cares. You can argue with that a couple of different ways, but that's what I think is going on there. So they have that passionate outburst. Odysseus fails once again to restrain his ego, but it's a happy occasion still. And, they love one another. And who doesn't love, when the couple gets together at the end? And I love also that in catching up, because, he's got some splaining to do. And it gets around to, well, gee, honey, what you been doing? The war ended 10 years ago. What you been up to? And he tells an awful lot of the story, and it's all recounted. And as you're going through, it's like, yeah, all right, yeah, I remember that. Scylla, Charybdis, yeah, the cattle of the sun god, yeah, Zeus, Calypso, yada, yada, yada. And it's all just sort of blurring by. It's like, yeah, all right, I've heard all this. And the instinct is to start skimming over. But when you're skimming over, you're realizing that, well, it's because it's all boring you. You're not really that invested. But what is he not saying at this moment? What is slipping past?
He's saying he's honest.
Yeah, he's kind of gliding over that part. He told her how Calypso trapped him there inside her hollow cave and wanted him to be her husband. She took care of him and promised him that she would set him free from death and time forever, but she never swayed his heart. His penis is another matter. It's a very subtle, again, Odysseus is a storyteller. He's telling a story and he's rearranging the details of the plot just a little. Yes, there was this lady, and she wanted me. She was tempting this goddess, you know, she was getting a little close in comfort, but I said no. Because I love you, honey, and only you.
I think he also skips the point when he was found by the young girls.
Yeah, he doesn't go into that. Cavorting with teenage girls who were half naked, somehow that doesn't make the story. Oversight, I get it. So yeah, they're back, they're united, they stay up until dawn talking and presumably other things. And it's nice. And a lot of people wonder, well, why doesn't the story end then? And a lot of critics will say it should end then because he's home. Nostos. He has returned. What's left to tell? There are a fair number of critics who come on and say, well, the rest of it, that whole last chapter, book 24, that was probably tacked on at the end, and we don't know why. It has no organic reason for being there. It just feels like it's over once they're, lying in one another's arms. That's kind of a modern belief in it, though, because modern storytelling that we understand, it really comes through the novel to us. And the novel is primarily the story of life and death and romance. And when the hero kisses the girl at the end, in front of the sunset, with the music swelling up, that's when the credits roll. But this story isn't really doing that. I think the reunion with Penelope is a significant part, but it's not the main driving focus of the poem. I think it's a little bit more abstract and a little more universal than that. We like to key in on the characters because, they're human beings and we can really have fun with that. But the poem is working on other levels. Michelle?
I feel like it leaves a lot of loose ends still. I feel like the last chapter I don't want to move into it because we haven't gotten into it yet, but I feel like we don't know what happened with the families. We don't know what's going on with the I feel like this is any idea what happens to the suitors after. So I feel like that's it's not just interesting, but it kind of I feel like it does end the story because this is a good happy ending, but there's also let me close.
Yeah.
They could have done that before Penelope and him because I feel like they don't really bring Penelope and him as much anymore. So you could have done that. I feel like it would have made more sense.
23 wraps up the story with Penelope. She doesn't really make another appearance. And it settles a lot of the questions. But your broader point about closure is very significant. Excuse me, because the story is largely about dealing with consequences throughout, and they all lived happily ever after ending that comes from they're lying in bed and watching the sunrise. That's nice, but that's not consequences. That's not the next step. It's not the story of how they got back together. I think it's a story about consequences.